Welcome to Drinking on the Edge. I'm its host, David Fuhr, and producing me today is Radio Free Rhinecliff's founder, Matty Rosenberg. We are investigating France's northerly Normandy region, which is home to the unique and complex spirit of, yet despite its century-old history and stature as the finest of any orchard fruit distillates anywhere in the world, most Americans are unaware of Calvados unless they're familiar with it as a secondary ingredient in cooking. That said, an increasing number of drinks professionals and consumers of fine brandies have discovered the versatility that is Calvados. So, produced in Normandy, France, from a handful of types and many varieties of mostly apples, along with some pears, within the three appellations that comprise Calvados that delineate its broad categorization: the appellation origin contrôlée Calvados, the Calvados Pays d'Auge, and Calvados Dom Fronté, each possessing specific rules which guide their production. Now, why are we talking about Calvados? It's the perfect time of year. It's autumn. It's apple season here in the Northern Hemisphere. But most importantly, I have the great pleasure of having as my guest Christian Drouin, whose family has been fashioning this fine spirit for many generations. I have experienced tasting this Calvados going back to the beginning of my career in the adult beverage trade, and then having the good fortune to visit him at his estate in Normandy. I believe it was the winter of 2007 or 8 to write a story for a sommelier magazine, being very impressed by the man and the work and the region. But most notably, a few years back, he wrote a book about Calvados, this precious little note that's been written about it over the years, but he did it in French, in France. However, the English version has just become available in the United States, and he's here to talk about Calvados from the framework of his book. Welcome, Christian.
Thank you.
Joining us here for the first time at Drinking on the Edge is another drinks professional who I've known since the early 90s, but more directly in his former guise as one of the progenitors of the craft beer movement from his Hayward, California brewing operation, and later to become a leading figure in the upsurge of craft distilling with his American Distilling Institutes, is Bill Owens. Welcoming him from California, Bill.
Good afternoon.
Now, Bill's reason for being here is not just because he's a great lover and knowledge holder of Calvados, but his White Mule Press is publishing Christian's book. I have been provided by Christian and his son Guillaume 5 examples of their fine Calvados products. But before we get to tasting, Christian, how would you define Calvados?
Unfortunately, one of the best kept secrets. Very simple. It's a product which is made by distilling cider, apple cider, or pear cider. It's produced in Normandy. And in Normandy I always say, it's 3 things. It's meadow. On the meadow, we get grass and apple and pear trees. Grass supports breeding cows and horses, and also trees that produce apple and pears. So in Normandy, what is really the essence of Normandy is cheeses. It's a country where the meadows are of very high quality. The grass is of very high quality, and the apple and pears that we grow there are not good to eat. When people have to find something else to do with those apple and pears, and they produce cider, and by distilling cider, the Calvados. And the farms, traditional farms, now is changing, but traditional farms were farms to breed cattle. Those Norman cows produce milk of the best possible quality to produce cheeses. And in the same meadows, you have the trees. So the production was always linked, meadow orchard. And at least for 2,000 years, Norman farmers have produced cider, and not at the beginning to enjoy, but just because the water was not drinkable. So they produced cider. In the 16th century, the quality of cider improved a lot, And thanks to the importation of special varieties from Spain and greater than the normal apple trees, and cider become very enjoyable. And same thing for the spirit, for the brandy, the apple brandy. For centuries, that was more a pharmacist product used by pharmacists, but not good to eat. In the 16th century, it became a product good to eat, to drink, sorry. And it became so famous that it was very extensively exported to the north of Europe. And that was a great period for Norman apple brandies. And unfortunately, people in the cognac area were very frustrated by the situation, and the protested a lot, obtaining a regulation from our King Louis XIV and forbidding the sale of Calvados outside of Normandy. So that opened the door to cognac. All the big names in cognac appeared immediately after this regulation was cancelled after the French Revolution, but that was too late. There was no more commercial networks. And those came back in the 19th century, but because of the phylloxera, no more wine available, no more cognac available. So consumers will drink and consume cider and Calvados.
It's probably worth mentioning that because of the particular climate and soil qualities in most of Normandy, it's unsuitable for the production of wine grapes, which is unusual for France, being such a wine country. And so it has its advantages and disadvantages. And I think you just noted one of the advantages when phylloxera hit, that was Calvados's opportunity to take a bigger place in the world market.
Yeah, absolutely. For some period in the history, we have been able to produce wines, but that disappeared at the end of the 19th century. I think it probably will come back very soon. Already one or two producers who have started with the warming climate. It's now possible again to produce wine. So there might be possibility for wine to come back in Normandy, whether that will be developed or not. But the fact that we have no wine, of course, push the production of people need alcohol and for many purposes. And so they produce their alcohol from the apple and pears available in Normandy. And what make the products, because we produce cider, brandy, apple brandy in many countries in the world. But Normandy offers a very special condition. Soil okay, climate okay, but most of all, what makes Calvados very special is the varieties of apples. Many varieties that we do not eat, you will never buy them in the market, but we have bitter, bittersweet, sweet, acidic, and that creates a very complex spirit. And so I've tasted apple brandy in many countries in the world, but I never found something close to Calvados. Maybe in the Somerset, in the south of England, there is something which is not too far from Calvados, which is good spirit, good brandy, apple brandies in the United States, but it cannot be compared because you don't find the complexity that you find in Calvados. And that complexity comes, in my opinion, primarily from all those apple varieties.
Out of curiosity, do you know approximately how many different varieties of the various types there are in Normandy?
Today, there are probably 400 or 500 different varieties still available. In the 19th century, I have books at home that show somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 different varieties. But now we try to concentrate on a smaller number of varieties, high quality, cross-pollination and everything. So I would say that in average orchards, you find more or less 30, 40, 50 different varieties. In the whole of Normandy, probably still 400 or 500 different varieties. But the process is to concentrate on something which will be probably around 70, 80 different varieties. For economical reason, also because the research have been able to identify the best varieties for the production of our cider and our Calvados.
When the historical records show the approximate start of Calvados production, what century, what year?
That's very difficult to answer. We know that in the 16th century, there was a production of Calvados that was enjoyed by consumers. We know that in the 16th century, there were people distilling because we have found still going back to the 13th century. But it's probably older too. I think when distillation started in France, I'm sure that started everywhere, more or less at the same time, but that's difficult to say because we have no written information. So, 4th century,
Yeah.
if you look at the many articles and everything, everybody's telling that Gilles de Gouberville was the first one to but out of the book, there is no mention of distillation of cider. He said that he was distilling his water, but we have no idea of what water was. Was it cider? Was it wine? Was it? It's probably cider, but it's not mentioned. So we have no written evidence when Calvados started.
So for the uninitiated, could you please share basically how do we make Calvados step by step?
We harvest apples from September to early December, depending on varieties. And the first step is to extract the juice. So we harvest them. Now it's mostly with a machine. Before it was only by hand. And the first step is to wash them. Then to eliminate those which are rotten. Then to crush them, then to extract the juice, to press the crushed apples, the juice into tanks. Before that was old oak, large barrel, but we call that ton acid, but now it's in stainless steel, even in small farms, because it's easier to clean. And fermentation is a natural process. We do not use any yeast. The yeast is there. I've never seen it, but it's there. Fermentation starts. If the juice was produced in September, October, it's still warm outside, so fermentation takes maybe 5-6 weeks. For juice produced in November, December, it usually takes 3, 4, 5 months. So it's very slow process. The slower is fermentation, the more aroma we get. So it's better to have slow fermentation. We probably have to modify our way of the way we work in the near future because of the global warming.
As so many agricultural producers do around the world.
Yeah, the maturation of apples now is roughly 2-3 weeks earlier than before.
Ooh.
So the late apples are now mature in November rather than December, and probably we will have to use controlled temperature tanks in the future. But up to now, we use just the steel tank, and that's how we see the changes. When fermentation is completed, we have no more sugar in the cider. Cider is completely dry. The alcohol strength is on the average 6%. And so we can distill the Calvados. Depending on appellation, we use different type of distillation. In Pays d'Auge, the oldest appellation going back to 1942, we have to double distill, pot still distillation. In the Drouin, an area where we grow, where we use more or less 50-60% of pears, it's single distillation, it's a column still. That's retain more fruit aroma. Pays d'Auge, the double distillation, make it more rounder, more softer maybe. This is justified by the apples and everything. The apple aroma is a mild aroma. The pear aroma is much more exuberant. And the column still retain more the primary aroma. And the double distillation makes something smoother, more rounder, more complex. So that's contribute to the identity of those two appellations. We also have a third appellation, which is a simple Calvados, you can do whatever you want. Use apple and pears. I'm not allowed to use more than 30% of pears, but in fact, it's between 0 and 5. In Donfontaine, it's a minimum of 30%, but in fact, it's 50-60%. Generic Calvados, you know what you want. You distill single or double distillation. And then you have to age them in oak barrel, European oak. We are not allowed to use American oak. It has to be European oak. I'm not sure that this is justified, but this is regulation.
But to be fair, for the general consumer, or even for the professional to be aware, the vast majority of Calvados that is produced is going to be either Calvados AOC or Pays d'Auge. There's not nearly as much Donfontaine produced or certainly exported, I'm led to believe. Is that correct?
This is true because Donfontaine requires 3 years of aging. While Pays d'Auge and Calvados, the minimum aging is 2 years. I think that was a stupid decision. I was one who was behind this appellation. I was asked by ENAO to help them to create the appellation, but they wanted 3 years. No, at the beginning they wanted 4. So I told them they were very stupid. Most of the Calvados is ending at 2 years, after 2 years of aging.
Besides, it's keeping your investment tied up. You can't recoup it. It's not a good business model to follow.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was stupid. More than Pays d'Auge, especially because Donfontaine is very good young. The fruity character is very important.
I agree.
So it's, although a very large production is made in the Donfontaine area, not much is commercialized as Donfontaine. And also, they have to, the constraints are more important. So people producing Calvados in Donfontaine prefer to sell it as AOC. They have less constraints and they can.
I see.
Younger.
So they can declassify or reclassify.
Yeah,
they have the flexibility. They have the flexibility.
This is exactly what they do.
Interesting. So you've given us lots of information about the production methods. What about the aging? Are there any nuances to aging you'd care to share in terms of the style of barrels, the size of barrels, the location in the rooms or warehouses where they age, in terms of heat, cold, humidity? What factors play a role in the development of Calvados?
Yeah, there are many factors. For me, this is the most exciting part, the production. We are lucky because we have, from that point of view, the right climate. Humid, not too hot, and not too cold in winter. The warehouse are not underground. It's not very. We need differences of temperature, but not too sudden, because if we have a big change in temperatures, then the Calvados will leak through the barrels, and so we have the right climate condition for that. We have to use oak. We have to use European oak. And when I started, I visited many small producers, and I asked them. I was surprised because I saw there many forms of sherry cask and port cask and Madeira cask. I said, "We have those barrels." And they told me, "Oh, because they are cheap and they do well." They were cheap because those wines at that time were imported in bulk, in barrels, in harbor of Le Havre, Rouen, Paris-Bercy, bottled there. And the empty barrels were not shipped back to Portugal or Spain, but they were for sale at low price. And they have discovered that among all those second-hand barrels, those were the best. They have used them, having contained wine coming from Algeria, rum, and many other products, but they were happy with those barrels. Before the Second World War, they were using many barrels made from oak, coming from Russia, from Romania, from Hungary. This is very good quality oak, but after the war, it was not impossible to import those. The Norman oak is a very high quality, and because of that, extremely expensive. Very few farmers, few of them, and we do that too, got barrels made from Norman oak, but they are much more expensive than others. But I was very interested in the fact that Calvados, some good Calvados were kept in the form of broad sherry, and I've conducted many experiments. And we won our first gold medal by finishing, aging a couple of years, our Calvados in those barrels. So I started to conduct many other experiments, and my son Guillaume has done even more. We started the Muscat de Livsal Banyuls fortified wines from the south of France. Then later we took Drouin from Hungary, and the results were also very good. We tried rum. Rum is very interesting, but for a short period of time because it's powerful.
Exactly. That's I found similarly.
Yeah.
Rum cask finished spirits of any kind take on a lot of character. The rum if you don't pull it out quick enough.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, is there a cooperage in Normandy that works with your native oak?
Unfortunately, there's only one.
Okay.
When I started, there were a few, but they've disappeared because the production of Calvados shrink for that period and cider. Oh, if we buy new barrels, that will come from cognac. We have one which is in Lisieux, but that's the only one. We try to get second-hand barrels because what we want to keep is the fruity character of Calvados.
So now you're talking about organoleptic qualities. So I've been holding back, but since you're talking now about the taste of smell of it, I have to start. So I'm going to start, if you don't mind, with your Le Calvados.
So, this is Selection. This is a blend I created in the 80s, working with Norman bartenders and some Norman chefs. That's the entry of the line, the young Calvados. And I asked them, what are you looking for in Calvados? They say we want a fruity character because for cocktails, for cooking, we don't want to feel the alcohol, but we don't want wood coming from barrels. We want a fruity character, the apple and the pear. So this one is made, although it's made in Pays d'Auge, I do not sell it in Pays d'Auge because we incorporate 20% Calvados coming from Drouin with a lot of pear.
Yes, you're listing on the back of the label here, pear is at 30%.
Yeah, the pear delivers a lot of fruity character. We keep it in very old oak so that we get very light in tannin coming from the oak. It requires a very good distillation because it should be smooth, although it's young. We do not add any sugar, so the distillation has to be perfect. We had no sugar, no caramel, no wood extract. The product is pure. It shouldn't burn your mouth or your nose. And it should deliver a lot of fruitiness.
It certainly is. I absolutely concur with you.
And this product is quite successful. We now ship in something like 65 countries, and everywhere it's successful, especially in bars.
I'm not surprised. It's a delicious starting point. You were talking earlier about apple cider. There's also Perry cider here in the U.S. The apple cider craze is still very strong. We have pear ciders as well for quite some time. But there's other apple products you wanted to mention. I've seen a white Calvados, La Blanche.
Yeah. La Blanche is, in fact, before the Second World War, Calvados was primarily consumed by farmers, the equivalent of one bottle every day.
Oh!
It was Café Calvin, started in the morning, the whole day. And they were calling it La Blanche. And because no time to acquire color from the barrels. But when the appellation contrôlée were established, at the beginning there was no minimum aging. But soon the producers decided to define Calvados as a brown spirit. And a minimum of 1 year was required. Later it was 1 year and a half, and then it was 2 years. So today you cannot sell Calvados unless it is aged at least 2 years in oak barrels. And the one who really pushed me a lot was the chief bartender of the Ritz Hotel in Paris, Colin Field, was every year telling me, Christian, I want a white Calvados. I said, I cannot produce a white Calvados because I have to keep it 2 years in the barrel. Say, find a solution. I say, the solution is to sell it as an apple brandy, as eau de vie de cidre. And if you buy 2 cases, I'm not sure I will be able to sell more than that. And finally, all the bartenders asked me, the cocktail was coming back. The Calvados-based cocktail were coming back. They have totally disappeared after the Second World War. And so more and more bartenders are asking me, can you apply us with a Calvados Blanc? So I decided to do it. And it happened to be a success. Not only with bartenders, but we found immediately 2 big markets for that, Russia and Ukraine. In Russia, they told me, oh, this is far much better than an aromatized vodka.
No,
We like that. And in Russia, they don't taste, so they say they drink.
exactly. Another noteworthy French spirit-producing region, Gascogne, had a similar encounter in creating a Blanche many years ago. It met with moderate success. I don't know what it did to stimulate
I
interest
think
in
it
Armagnac.
doesn't. It makes sense with Calvados because we want the fruit aroma.
And there's certainly more character in apples, to be sure, than Uni Blanc.
Yeah, it's more interesting that I'm a lover of Armagnac, so I don't want to. But
We have that in common.
yeah, Blanche d'Armagnac has less character. For me, it's not so. Calvados is more interesting as a Blanche.
You're also creating an apple gin. That is something, of course, the gin craze is still booming.
Yeah, that's my
Many
son
places.
Guillaume.
Yeah.
Who created that. When he joined me, he was a bit frustrated of putting his feet in his father's shoes. So he wanted really to do something from himself. And when he was 13, 14 years old, he was absolutely much more than interested, fascinated by the aromas. He was buying a magazine that he was not reading just because every week there was a cap of a new
Scratch and sniff. I understand.
Yeah.
So that helped
And
him to create a gin. And there's also Calvados creams and liqueurs that are also available and made. But with the limited time that we have, Christian, I want to continue. I've already poured for myself your VSOP, and you were already talking a little bit about aging periods for Calvados. Of course, the minimum is 2 years for a Pays d'Auge. Is that correct? But the VSOP, no?
VSOP is the minimum of 4 or 5 years, and this one is about 7 years. So what we try to achieve with VSOP is to deliver a fruity Calvados. The fruitiness is still the main character, but we want to build a little bit of structure, body, and complexity, with the apple aroma being the dominant component, but already more strong. This is only apples. No pears in that, or maybe 1% or something like that. But so this is apple. So the character is completely different from the previous one, which has a certain percentage of pears. Not that important, but still. So it's apple. It's a mild aroma, but of course, it's about 7 years old in oak cast, old oak again. So
it's a big step up in terms of complexity, clarity, and focus. The apple character is much more dominant, as it should be. The oak is playing a role here, but it's a secondary role to be sure. And the harmony between, shall we say, and there's much more going on than just apples and oak, but the harmony here is quite lovely and well achieved. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so that's an after dinner drink. Okay, so you can also use in cocktail because the fruit, some bartenders use VSOP for their cocktails. You can use it with food. You can use it.
Now, this is a Calvados. You'd sent me some notes here, and you included the phrase "le trou normand" or the Norman hole. And this phrase was introduced to me during my second visit to Europe, and I was a guest in the south of France, near the town of Anduze. And the family I was visiting with this holiday period, we had feasts every night for 4 or 5 nights, and they were quite fond of having their trou normand throughout the meal. So I got plenty of Calvados during that, and I learned the habit of that in the French meal for those who are so inclined. So your VSOP would make a fantastic
Yeah, that's
Sean.
perfect for Trou Normand.
Yeah.
Trou Normand was part of the traditional big family meal.
Yes.
Now we don't eat that much. But if you go back, when I was a kid, the family meals, that was, we started with an tree, then we have fish, then we have meat, and then we have cheeses, when we have, so, and we cook with cream and butter. So
Absolutely. And Normandy has some of the finest butter, not only in France but in the world.
Absolutely.
In the world, please.
Yeah, I agree.
Earlier you mentioned the absolutely important cheeses. As
Yeah.
I taste your XO, please explain why
Yeah.
your XO
XO,
makes for a great pairing with your cheeses.
Yeah.
So,
is to produce a very classic Calvados Pays d'Auge, to have the most perfect balance between components coming from the fruits and aromas coming from the oak. So the fruit shouldn't dominate, the oak shouldn't dominate. We try to get the balance. And so this is, I think, that's the best illustration of Calvados Pays d'Auge. And the last 18 years, we have succeeded to win every 2 years the tender of Air France for first class and business class. Calvados, they ask a top sommelier, when one was won the title of world best sommelier, to make the selection. And so every 2 years there is a new tender, and we have won it every 2 years for the last 18 years, because that what they want is something very classic, which is represent France through Calvados.
not to be fair, you share the praise along with many other great Calvados producers. However, I have to say that your house style is clearly represented in this XO. It's a fine, elegant style. It might not be as explosive as some of your friendly competitors. It is, however, a style that can be readily understood by both experts and novices alike. This is what
Exactly.
Yeah, when I talk to people about Calvados and they ask for any sort of reference point or recommendation, before introducing them to some we say more eclectic colleagues of yours, I will first take them taste the Calvados of Christian Drouin, taste the full range, and then play beyond that. I think you'll find you come back to Drouin no matter what. Yeah.
And very often people are surprised because it's an old Calvados, it's over 12 years old. And they say, oh, it's very clear. I say, yeah, it's clear because this is the color given by the barrel. We don't use any new barrels, and we don't add any caramel, any other artificial color. We don't see the point. We prefer to explain that it is, and even from one bottling to another, there might be slight differences in color. We don't see the point to offer exactly the same color. This is the natural color given by barrels, and each barrel give a different color. And the thing is that our orchards are bio, they're organic, and we never add whatsoever in the product. So distillation.
Can I ask you about, first of all, which of the classic Normandy cheeses would you choose to pair with your XO?
Oh, I think cheeses that already have a pronounced taste. Livarot is probably the one to pair with an XO. Camembert, before Camembert had a strong taste, but now they produce milder Camembert. So I think it's better with cider, good cider, Pays d'Auge seed, that's perfect. But with a Livarot, it's too strong. That kills any red wine. So don't bring your best wine at the end of the meal to pair to accompany a Livarot cheese. The wine is dead. But with Calvados, it's very good balance. It's matched well, and so which is also if it's there are only 5 farmers now producing. Yes, you have 3 big groups. Lactalis is the huge group, the number 1 producer of cheese in the world. They have bought Kraft in the US. They have bought a big company in Italy, and they produce cheeses for everybody.
Yeah,
Oh,
we know them here.
yeah.
So I need to allow Bill a chance to chime in. Bill, the next Calvados we'll be trying is a vintage one. Perhaps you want to query Christian a bit about aging processes, especially for single vintage Calvados.
Yeah, definitely.
Bill?
Vintage. When I started, my father has built an inventory of Calvados, but he was not selling. I started, and he was not mixing sell of the product with the vintage. And we got that recognized by the administration. Everything is certified. And for me, vintage is, we try to offer our best product. We keep the best barrel to sell them as a vintage. And we sell vintage when they are 20 years old. So the youngest one is 2004, just 20 years old. And the oldest we have now is, I think, more production is 61, maybe with a few older, but I think it's almost finished.
Was that 61 you said?
Yeah, I think now the 61 is the oldest that we still have. And 2004 is the youngest that we sell. So we try to give them their own personality, to make them as different as possible, because the fruit come from the same orchard, they are processed the same way. So it's by the aging that we will give them their character. So the choice of barrel and everything. And so the vintage, we want to deliver complexity. Now, the influence of the barrel is the dominant influence. The fruit has to be there, but the fruit is not central.
I would agree. The character here is, it's not as mouth-filling and supple as the XO. However, it has a much longer finish, and it's a kind of a nervous finish to me. It continues and continues.
It has very long finish.
Yes.
That complexity, it's full body. It's Calvados like that. If you do a chromatography analysis, you identify over 200 aromas.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And somehow you don't understand how they, all those aromas totally continuous chemical process, combination and recombination of components. You have a very complex product, and the lingering taste is incredible.
Yep. If this was not so subtle and complex, I'd actually enjoy this paired with a fine cigar. I don't want to obliterate the complexity of this. I would probably opt for your VSOP or even your XO for cigar. But lastly, you have a product called ABC.
ABC is another creation of my son Guillaume. He's very creative, and as I mentioned, is extremely interested in the world of aromas. So with gin, it was an apple gin or a pear gin. The last one was Perrin, who won the prize of World Best Gin in London last year, and is an equivalent to vermouth. But vermouth, it has to be made from wine, so we are not allowed to say it's a vermouth. So we call it ABC for, in French, apéritif à base de. Everybody, it's ABC.
That works. And I would call this a semi-sweet, semi-dry style. It's not dry, it's not sweet, it's in the middle, and it's soft. It's not particularly herbaceous, but the herbs are there. But definitely has the apple character.
He has done a lot of research for 5 years research with the help of top Parisian bartenders. And so it's an equivalent to vermouth. And the base is Proponent de Normandie, is an equivalent to fortified wine. We mix the juice with a strong Calvados, and we have a product which is about 70%. Then it got a special spices that in that. And so that's for gin. He mentioned all the aromas. For that, he kept that more secret.
So I would say that it's a lovely aperitif. It's not something that I would mix much. I would just put it on ice by itself, maybe with a touch of citrus. Okay. So to help us conclude here a little bit, I need to say that, and add it to my stories, and Bill will jump in with his, that my an early experience I had with Calvados was bicycling with a friend back in 1990 from Paris to Roscoff. which of course brought us through the Norman countryside. I remember stopping at not even a village, a roadside diner, a very rough place for lunch one day. In addition to my really full lunch, I said, I would really like some Calvados, knowing I was in Norman country. And the woman said, ooh, would you like something that has a brand name, or would you want something that my cousin made? And I said, oh, what's cheaper? I was a poor guy. And she said, buy my cousin's stuff. And I had her cousin's stuff, and it was pretty awful. So not only did I drink a full glass, and my full glass, I'm not talking about a small pour, I'm talking about a glass with my big meal. And it was a lovely summer day. No problem. I can bicycle and stay upright. But I also bought a liter in a pull top rubber stop bottle to take with me, a liter, for a ridiculously low, I think we were not on the euro then. It must have been something around 30 franc.
Yeah,
really cheap for a liter. Yeah.
It was very cheap, yeah.
And that kept me going. Now, mind you, in retrospect, this is before I entered the adult beverage business. It gave me energy, and it was an early introduction. Not the best, but the early introduction. Yeah. We've done much better here today. The world has changed. We're here with one of the finest.
In the 1980s, I had a small German pot still, 200 liter, which is about 50 gallons. And of course, I'm a brewer, so I love single malts, but I heard about Calvados, and I'm in an apple growing region, Petaluma, Santa Rosa, which is about 30 miles from here. And so I said, I'm going to make some Calvados. So I start looking around, and I can't find any apple cider anywhere. In Northern California, the only cideries were up in the state of Washington, because apples like that more for northern climate. But finally, I located a guy who was importing apple cider, and I went up to his little factory, and I bought a 50-gallon drum for 3 of apple cider. So it's a little hard to transport because it's quite heavy. Down to the distillery, and 50 gallons my still was 50 gallons, so I could fill it with 8% cider and distill it. And so we ran with there's 5 plates, and 50 gallons yielded about a little bit less than 10 gallons at 100 proof. And so we had some small barrels. They were American barrels, so they're toasted. And I didn't know much about toasting what I'm doing, but I'm just making alcohol, apple brandy, put it in my little barrel. We set it aside. And 3 or 4 months later, we go back to sample it. And because it's a small barrel, they don't seal very well. So half of it had already evaporated in 4 or 5 months. But finally, we got it out of the barrel into a couple glasses to taste it. And what I had done, because I put it in American Alba is the wood we use because it has vanilla notes, and my apple cider tasted like whiskey because I put it in the wrong barrel. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I've had an interest in apple brandy for a long time, and Christian I'm hoping to have him come to the ADI conference in August and do a lecture, and perhaps we can set aside a room and do a tasting. We haven't worked out the details on that, but it's an exciting product. The market is niche, but so was rye whiskey.
Oh, my God.
There was none, and now everybody's doing rye. And the apple industry in America has basically failed. And I found out later that the apple cider that I had bought in the 300-gallon barrel came from China. I was
about to say, here in the Hudson Valley, where a radio-free Rhinecliff is located, it is the home of apple production, the original home of apple production here in the United States, and I would argue for all of North America. It is where Johnny Appleseed truly existed, and we still here in our farmers markets, we can find in our farms the widest variety of apples in the entirety of North America. And some of them are extraordinary, and you wonder, well, why aren't these commercialized more? Why do we have so limited varieties produced in large quantities from the West Coast and from Texas? Let's leave that to another conversation. But I have to say that the opportunities for quality apple brandy distillation are best pursued, I would argue, here in the Hudson Valley. We've already done an episode of Drinking on the Edge with a few of the finest. And I would strongly encourage Christian, when he makes his next visit to U.S., to come and spend some time with these people here in the Hudson Valley, taste what's going on, sit down with these people who are working hard to fashion them, exchange ideas. I'm sure they would love
Yeah.
to hear from you. But before we close down, Bill, lastly, can you please share with the audience why it is that you and White Mule Press chose to take on Christian's book, which had done well for itself in France for a few years, to take it on to be the U.S. publisher, the first English language publisher to date?
When Christian approached me about doing the book, it had already been translated into English. So it's a huge advantage for us. The artwork was available. We have a graphic designer. Margaret, the Distiller magazine has other copy editing, so we could go through the book and put it in more, I want to say, American style English. So the editing was relatively easy to put it together and get it out. We were on Amazon, we're in White Mule Press, but also Christian has told me that he'd sold 6,000 copies of it in Japan. So I feel there's a market for that. 10 years ago, I felt there was a market for rye whiskey, and lo and behold, these niche brands are becoming more and more mainstream as the public wants to try interesting spirits.
Bill, you have a long history of being a visionary. You were the first guy to make a pumpkin beer to great success. Your alimony ale, though it wasn't necessarily labeled as an IPA, was an early IPA for the U.S. market. So you're a guy who has a history of being ahead of the curve. Let's hope that rings true for Calvados, and Christian is exemplary for his Calvados. I encourage everybody to look for Christian's book. What is the exact title, please, here in the U.S.?
The Art of Calvados?
Art of Calvados.
Art of Calvados.
By White Mule.
I thank
Right.
Bill for accepting to publish the book, because I started by publishing books in French. I succeeded to find a publisher in Japan to publish a book in Japanese, but my dream was to publish it in English because I could reach a much larger audience. The problem of Calvados is it's a problem of education, knowledge. Few people know what the product is. So many times I'm asked, what is Calvados? It's okay. We have one of the world great brandy, but few people know it, and there are historical reasons for that. But
We're here to change that. Listen, I want to one last thank you to Bill Owens of White Mule Press, the publisher of Christian Drouin's The Art of Calvados book. Look for it where all books can be acquired. Christian Drouin of his Calvados distillery. Thank you for your work in writing this book, The Art of Calvados, and more to the point of the history of Calvados that you've imparted to us, not only through the book, but through your excellent Calvados drinks that are widely available in, as you said, 65 countries and here in the U.S. as well. We do have listeners from around the world, so hopefully they'll have access to it as well. I look forward to enjoying your generous samples for many nights to come. Thank you guys for drinking on the edge.
thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Talk to you later, Christian.
Thank you, Bill.